Hey everyone, I'm John Negroni, film editor for theyoungfolks.com and host of the Cinemaholics podcast, finally ready to talk about House of Gucci. The embargo lifted today, and I took a little bit of extra time with my review though, hope that's alright. And let's just get right into it. House of Gucci is the second film from director Ridley Scott to come out in 2021. Obviously, he's done many films, but he did two just this year. His last feature was The Last Duel, which I actually talked about here just a matter of weeks ago, maybe over a month ago, back in October. Now, that film's production had been interrupted by the pandemic, so they had to delay shooting, and during that time when, Ridley Scott, Adam Driver, they're hanging out, and Adam Driver, of course, was one of the leads of The Last Duel, and Scott actually approached him about being in his next movie, which, you guessed it, is this one, House of Gucci. So this is why both films are coming out so close to one another, both of them being Ridley Scott films with Adam Driver as a co-lead. The film also stars the wonderful Lady Gaga in her next big awards play since A Star is Born back in, I think, 2018. And she plays a woman named Patrizio Reggiani, based on a real person living in the late 70s of Milan, and she tries to win the affections of Maurizio Gucci, played by Adam Driver. This happens not long after finding out his last name, to be clear, because yes, he is that Gucci. He's heir to the world-famous luxury fashion house that I'm sure you've heard of. Now, naturally, not everyone in the Gucci family approves of Maurizio getting together with someone so far beneath his social class. His father, who is played pretty stiff, yet briefly sweet by Jeremy Irons. He's kind of channeling a little bit of Daniel Day-Lewis from Phantom Thread. His dad warns Maurizio that a woman like Patrizia, whose family owns little more than a fleet of trucks, only wants to marry him, only wants to be with him for his name and future fortune. But Maurizio doesn't listen, and he wants to marry her anyway, and just when it seems like the entire family will cut him off forever over this decision, Patrizia manages to charm his more agreeable uncle, who is played by Al Pacino, and the two officially join ranks with that side of the family, which also includes an eccentric oaf named Paolo, played by Jared Leto, that you can hardly recognize him. It's essentially Arrested Development, but with an Italian dynasty, and it's not very funny or well written. At least I think so. So first things first, this movie is entirely too long. It's filled with far too many scenes, lacking a cinematic moment, one that justifies the inclusion of the scene beyond the lowest bar of, well, this will advance the plot. Once in a while, we do get terrific showcases for the actors, as the movie finds its more assured footing, I think, when the various family members are simply tearing into each other, both in subtle and expectedly bombastic ways. They're the reason to see this movie, but more often than not, these scenes, some of them even filler scenes to be honest, are as garish as the dated clothing and the jewelry that these people are wearing. It's weirdly a movie that looks both cheap and expensive at the same time, which is ironically, or coincidentally, I should say, my opinion of Gucci fashion items. And I say that as somebody who is well outside the realm of people who take an interest in Gucci and fashion. I am self-aware enough to understand that there is a flair of appeal to this kind of story, this subject matter, that I was never going to find inherently compelling. But look, that limitation, which everybody has a limitation like this with plenty of films. All films are about different things. You're always going to watch something about something that you're not inherently interested in. That's going to be outside of your already realm of, like your current realm of interest, I should say. But there are other films that hasn't stopped other films from getting me, and I'm sure you, to care about something we never thought we would care about. Movies just have that magic to them. They can spark interest in something you never thought you might like. I was just on here not too long ago talking about King Richard and tennis, and I think tennis, my love of tennis, came from movies back when I was a kid, but I'd have to dig into the old memory banks. Now, I want to mention Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese is the master of the angle, or finding the angle in any given movie, I think. He is the obvious point of comparison here as a director because he is, of course, an Italian-American director who has, as far as I see it, he's wrung in many of his movies just universal fascination out of what I could consider somewhat dull subject matter, especially things that last over 3 hours or more. So after House of Gucci ended, I could not stop craving and thinking about what Scorsese might have done better with this material. the performances are far from the problem. I actually found Adam Driver to be unusually relaxed in this role, and it was a bit of relief to see him slip so naturally back into the cool, contemplative persona. I think he's pulled off really well before, and especially in roles like Patterson, though in this one he gets to show the sort of gradual growth in villainy, the decline in villainy, I guess, that reminds of something like The Godfather. And speaking of The Godfather, we have Al Pacino, who carries on his killer comeback from The Irishman, another Scorsese, getting more chances than I expected him to get, honestly, to really shine in this movie. I think he decisively alters the course of the entire film through his sheer presence alone, as there is a clear mark in the first act when Al Pacino's character shows up, and his introduction it just injects a lot of much needed energy into really the slow start of the movie, I thought. Lady Gaga, she's similarly working at a high level in this movie, despite how unfortunately drab I'd say the writing suits her otherwise willing effort. I can see some people out there blaming her for her caricature acting being kind of grating, but I think she's depicting what she's being told to depict. I think that's kind of the point of her character, the point of the performance, and I think she's delivering the direction, the intention pretty well, considering all of that. And of all the actors, I mean, even if you count Leto behind all of his makeup, Gaga, I think, is the one who surprisingly disappears the most into her part and makes it her own. That's especially impressive considering it's Lady Gaga. She's a superstar. We all know what she looks like, and yet in this movie, I wasn't seeing Lady Gaga all the time. To the point where I found myself actually buying into the idea that I was looking at the real life Patricia and flirting and sparring with Maurizio Gucci, who happens to look a lot like Adam Driver. I think if you're up for some really good performances with full-on effort, and if you just are genuinely interested in this story, it's an incredible story. It's stranger than fiction. It's the Guccis. I mean, I think a lot of people have interest in that. I just wasn't one of them immediately. And if you want to see something like that, you want to see it told competently enough in the usual 3-act structure of a movie, albeit pretty long and crammed with a lot of filler, I think, a second act especially that really just is way, way, way too long, then if you can get past that, I think House of Gucci is an easy enough recommendation. But just know that you're going to have to sit through a lot of pain and suffering in this runtime, at least I think so, which might cost you more than you're willing to pay for this type of brand. Extra credits. Okay, the second time I'm doing this, I'll explain again. Extra credits is when I try to cram in some things that I didn't get to. So let's see. I did mention Jared Leto. Jared Leto, he's fine. I think that he's funny, but I'm laughing at him, and I think I'm supposed to be laughing at him, and there you go. I don't think he genuinely adds that much to the movie, aside from a subplot that is crucial to the movie narratively. But yeah, in terms of this movie's personality, there were just times when it just didn't click for me, I guess, with Jared Leto. Just the writing of the character, but again, it's kind of amazing what he's able to sort of do with this part. He really goes a little extra. He usually does that in other movies, and I don't love how he does it, but in this one, it worked for me all right. In terms of the technicals, I didn't love the overall cinematography here, which surprised me quite a bit. It's by Dariusz Wolski, who did The Last Duel, which The Last Duel, that cinematography was excellent. I think that titular duel was one of the best action sequences of the year, maybe the best. And I mean, I've loved his shooting of other films. He did Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, I usually am pretty excited when I find out he's going to be doing something. He's done a lot of great work, but yeah, it didn't really impress me here. The production design, I think the production design, it does serve the story in a lot of key ways. They have like these big sets and everything, but I don't know. I just thought the big houses, the fantabulous sets, they all just kind of blended in after another. There wasn't like a sense of place I really felt with this movie. It is odd how the movie is as long as it is, but there were times where it just cuts and flashes forward, and I feel like we were actually missing things. And I think that was really the heart of my frustration. It was like I felt like we were skipping things and dwelling on the wrong things in terms of I wanted to see, I mentioned, the gradual decline, the gradual villainy, and I wasn't always gradual. There were times where things just sort of like cut to the chase in a way that I thought was a little bit too fast. And the production design did help because it helped tell the story. You see how things change in the production design over time in the film, and that tells you how many years are passing. But there were times when also I think that there was a lot of repetition to some of what we were seeing in that respect, and it's a little bit hit or miss for me overall. And last thing I'll say, I thought the music by sorry, I can't say his name right, Harry Gregson Williams, it didn't do that much to stand out, in my opinion. I can't really remember a single chord. Please don't challenge me to hum a tune from this movie. The composition doesn't really stand out at all, and it might be because this is a movie where lots of other things are competing to stand out. It's also a very soundtrack heavy movie, plenty of needle drops, which I'm fine with. It did make me kind of reminisce though, because Shrek was a lot like that, and Gregson Williams did the Shrek movies. I'm not just mentioning Shrek for no reason, but yeah, he did the composition for that, and I remember the soundtrack of Shrek quite well, but I also remember the composition from Shrek. I mean, part of that is because it's like DreamWorks' theme song, but even still, I think that it's a very striking piece of music, and it's a weird thing to compare House of Gucci to Shrek. I wonder how many other people will be doing that. Probably smarter people will not be, but anyway, House of Gucci opens in theaters starting November 24th, and from what I'm seeing, it's divisive. It's kind of mixed to positive. Last time I saw the Rotten Tomatoes score, it's like in the high 60s, which surprised me a bit. I thought this was going to be like way, way low. But I guess other people are giving it way more slack than I am. So if you were really curious about this one, you were really interested, and you're like, man, this is a bummer, John didn't like it, I'm upset. I'm not the only person out there talking about this movie. So maybe somebody else has something to say about this movie that will be closer to your taste, and you might get a better idea of whether or not it is your taste and worth your time. So be sure to do that if you're still on the fence about House of Gucci. Otherwise, I'm going to be talking about some other films this week for sure. Red Rocket is coming. I keep promising it, but I also am trying to decide if I'm going to talk about Tick, Tick, Boom. That one's a big question mark for me because it came out on Netflix. It was already on limited release. I didn't see it early or anything, and I had all these other things to get to in terms of reviews, so I just didn't have a slot for it. If you are curious about what I think about the movie and you don't want to wait to find out if I'm going to do a review, I think it's probably unlikely that I'll be doing a review of Tick, Tick, Boom, but I did review the film on the Cinemaholics podcast. The episode came out today. I talked about Tick, Tick, Boom with Will Ashton, my co-host on the show, and, short story, I liked it. I had some interesting things to say about it. I think it's a pretty satisfying musical, but we had a good discussion about the movie, the good, the bad, the middle. But yeah, that's it from me for this one. Thank you so much for listening, and really appreciate all the support from you all. So I'll see you on the next one. Hopefully we'll be talking about some big awards films coming up down the line that I will not promise yet because I don't know if I'm going to see them in time. But until then, I'll see you on the next one.